What would you do if someone was unfairly accused and treated with prejudice? In a quiet gym, an ordinary day turns into a tense standoff as a new security guard crosses the line. But just when things seem to spiral out of control, a powerful act of courage changes everything. Watch this gripping story unfold and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have stepped in? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread the message of standing up for what's right. John Cena was in his element, focused and determined as he worked through his usual morning routine in the gym. The weights clinked rhythmically, and the faint hum of treadmills and ellipticals filled the air. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could push himself physically and mentally without the distractions of fame. The early hours were his favorite. The gym was quiet, and the regulars respected each other's space. But today, something felt different. His concentration faltered as a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. Glancing toward the source of the noise, John spotted a large man in a security uniform standing imposingly over a young black woman. She clutched a sleek designer handbag close to her chest, her expression calm but firm. The man's stance was aggressive, his voice loud and filled with accusation. The scene was out of place, jarring against the usually respectful atmosphere of the gym. John set down his weights and straightened up, his eyes narrowing as he watched the interaction unfold. He couldn't hear the conversation clearly from where he stood, but the body language spoke volumes. The woman wasn't backing down, but the guard was leaning closer, his tone sharp and confrontational. John adjusted his towel on his shoulder and took a step closer, straining to hear what was being said. "You expect me to believe that bag is yours?" the guard said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let's be real here. People like you can't afford something like that." The woman raised her chin, her eyes locking on his. "Excuse me? People like me?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "What exactly do you mean by that?" The guard scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. "You know exactly what I mean. Don't play dumb. That bag is worth more than you probably make in a year. Either you stole it or someone gave it to you, and I don't see anyone here vouching for you." The woman's expression darkened, but she maintained her composure. "This bag is mine. I bought it, and I don't owe you or anyone else an explanation." "Bought it?" The guard laughed, shaking his head. "Yeah, right. With what? You think I'm stupid? I've been around long enough to know when someone's lying." The gym seemed quieter now, the usual noises fading into the background as John moved closer. He could hear the frustration in the woman's voice as she replied, "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I can or can't afford, and you have no right to assume otherwise." "Listen here," the guard snapped, his tone hardening. "I'm responsible for keeping this place secure, and that means keeping out people who don't belong. So unless you want this to get ugly, I suggest you hand over that bag right now." The woman's grip on the bag tightened, her knuckles turning white. "You're crossing the line. You can't just take my property because you think you're entitled to it." "Oh, I can, and I will," the guard said, reaching out and yanking the bag from her hands. "Let's see what's inside. Maybe we'll find out where you really got this." She took a step forward, her voice rising. "You don't have the right to do this. Give me my bag back." The guard smirked, holding the bag out of her reach. "The only right you have is to explain yourself. But judging by your attitude, I doubt you'll come clean. What's the matter? Too used to getting away with things?" Her voice dropped, filled with controlled anger. "You're disgusting, and you're wrong. About everything. The guard's smile faded, replaced by a scowl. Watch your mouth. You're in no position to talk to me like that. His hand moved to his belt, and he pulled out a small black device, a taser. He held it up, its prongs glinting under the gym lights. One more word, and we'll see how tough you really are. The woman froze, her eyes fixed on the taser. Her breathing quickened, but she didn't back down. You're going to regret this, she said quietly, her voice trembling but defiant. The guard took a step closer, his grip on the taser tightening. No, you'll regret thinking you could come in here and act like you own the place. You're nothing but trouble. Before he could take another step, a calm but commanding voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Both the guard and the woman turned toward the voice. John Cena stood a few feet away, his broad shoulders squared and his expression stern. His presence was impossible to ignore, and his voice carried an authority that immediately shifted the energy in the room. Who the hell are you? The guard demanded, his bravado faltering as he looked John up and down. John stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I'm someone who's not going to stand by and watch you abuse your authority. Put the taser down. The guard hesitated, but his grip on the taser didn't loosen. This isn't your business. Stay out of it. John's jaw tightened, his voice dropping to a warning tone. It became my business the moment you started threatening her. I've seen enough to know you're way out of line. The woman's eyes flicked to John, a mixture of relief and curiosity in her expression. The guard, however, wasn't ready to back down. She's lying. That bag isn't hers, and I'm doing my job. No, John said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're using your job as an excuse to harass someone who's done nothing wrong. I know her. I've seen her here before, and that bag has always been with her. It's hers. The guard's face turned red, his frustration boiling over. You don't know anything about me or how I do my job. This isn't your fight. John took another step closer, his voice calm but unyielding. You're right. I don't know you, but I know enough to see that this isn't about the bag. It's about your prejudice, and I'm not going to let it slide. The gym seemed to hold its breath as the tension mounted. The guard's grip on the taser wavered, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. You think you're tough? Let's see how tough you are when... Before he could finish, John moved. With a speed and precision honed over years in the ring, he closed the distance between them, disarming the guard and knocking the taser to the ground in one fluid motion. The guard staggered back, his confidence shattered. John's voice was steady as he addressed him. Enough is enough. You're done here. The guard stared at him for a moment, then turned and stormed toward the exit, muttering curses under his breath. John bent down, picked up the bag, and handed it to the woman. Are you okay? He asked, his voice softening. She nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she took the bag. Thank you. I didn't think anyone would step in. John smiled gently. You stood up for yourself. That's what matters. I just made sure he didn't take it further. The gym returned to its usual rhythm as the woman thanked him again and walked toward the workout area, her head held high. John watched her go, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. Justice had been served, and once again he had proven that standing up for what's right was always worth it. The gym's usual calm had shifted into an uneasy quiet as John Cena stood watching the guard storm out of the entrance. The young woman, still clutching her bag tightly, took a moment to collect herself. Her composure had been shaken, but she refused to let the guard's words and actions define her day. She offered a small, grateful smile to John before stepping toward one of the treadmills, hoping to salvage what remained of her workout. John, however, couldn't shake the tension from the interaction. He returned to his weights, but kept an eye on the entrance. He suspected that the incident wasn't over yet. Something about the guard's demeanor had struck him as volatile, the kind of person who wouldn't let a perceived slight go unanswered. A few minutes later, his suspicions were confirmed. The guard re-entered the gym, his expression darker than before, and his steps purposeful. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. In one hand, he carried a clipboard, and in the other, a radio he used to communicate with the gym's management. His eyes immediately sought out the woman who was adjusting the settings on the treadmill. "There you are," he barked, marching toward her. His voice carried across the room, drawing the attention of a few staff members at the front desk. "Thought you could get away with it, huh?" The woman froze for a moment, then turned to face him. Her expression was a mix of frustration and defiance. "Get away with what? I haven't done anything wrong." The guard held up the clipboard, shaking it slightly as if it were a proof of her supposed guilt. "You're not even supposed to be here," he said, his voice dripping with accusation. "Your name isn't on the membership list. Care to explain that?" The woman frowned, stepping off the treadmill. "That's not true," she said firmly. "I've been a member here for months. Check again." "Oh, I checked," the guard sneered. "And funny thing, your name isn't anywhere in the system. So either you snuck in or you're using someone else's membership. Which is it?" The woman's jaw tightened and she crossed her arms. "Neither. I'm a paying member. If there's an issue with the system, that's not my fault." John watched the exchange from a distance, his grip on the barbell tightening. He set the weight down carefully, wiping his hands on a towel as he moved closer. The guard's tone was escalating, and it was clear that he wasn't interested in resolving anything amicably. "You think you're clever, don't you?" the guard said, taking a step closer to her. "Walking in here like you belong, flashing that bag around, acting like you're better than everyone else. Well, newsflash, you don't belong here, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." The woman stood her ground, though her hands trembled slightly. "You don't get to decide who belongs here," she said, her voice steady, "and you certainly don't get to treat me like this because of your own biases." The guard's face twisted with anger. "Biases? You think this is about me? No, this is about people like you thinking you can break the rules and get a free pass. Well, not on my watch." John stepped forward, his presence immediately drawing attention. "That's enough," he said, his voice firm but calm. The guard turned, his expression hardening as he recognized John. "You again? Didn't I tell you to stay out of this?" John's gaze didn't waver. "And I'm telling you that you're out of line. She's done nothing wrong, and you know it. This has nothing to do with rules and everything to do with your prejudice." The guard scoffed, shaking his head. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's not in the system, and that's reason enough to kick her out." "Then why didn't you handle it professionally?" John shot back. "Why didn't you check with the front desk or management instead of threatening her and accusing her of theft?" The guard opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to falter under John's steady gaze. Instead, he switched tactics, gesturing towards a radio in his hand. "Fine. Let's see what management has to say about this. They'll back me up." John folded his arms, his stance unyielding. "Go ahead. Call them. I'll wait." The guard hesitated, clearly not expecting the challenge. His bravado wavered, but his pride wouldn't let him back down entirely. He raised the radio to his lips, but before he could speak, the woman stepped forward. "Don't bother," she said sharply. "I'll go to the front desk myself and clear this up. Unlike you, I have nothing to hide." She turned on her heel and walked toward the front desk, her steps confident despite the tension in the air. John followed a few paces behind, ensuring that the guard didn't try anything further. The staff at the front desk looked up as the group approached, their expressions curious but neutral. "Can I help you?" one of them asked. "Yes," the woman said, her tone polite but firm. "This man has been harassing me, claiming that my name isn't in the system. I'd like you to check." The staff member nodded, pulling up the membership records on their computer. They typed in her name and scanned the screen for a moment before looking up with a smile. "You're all set," they said. "Your membership is active and valid." The woman turned to the guard, her eyes blazing. "Satisfied?" The guard's face turned red, and he muttered something under his breath. John stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Apologize." The guard glared at him. "For what?" "For treating her like a criminal," John said, "for assuming the worst because of your own prejudices, and for wasting everyone's time." The silence that followed was heavy. The guard looked between John, the woman, and the staff members, his expression a mix of anger and humiliation. Finally, he muttered a grudging apology, though it was clear he didn't mean it. The woman shook her head. "Keep your apology. Just stay out of my way." With that, she turned and walked back toward the treadmill, her head held high. John watched her go, a small smile tugging at his lips. He turned to the guard one last time. "You should think about what just happened. And if you can't do your job without letting your biases get in the way, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." Without waiting for a response, John walked back to his weights, the matter settled for now. But in the back of his mind, he knew the guard wasn't finished. This wasn't the kind of person who took being challenged lightly. John braced himself for what might come next. The atmosphere in the gym remained charged even after the confrontation at the front desk. John Cena returned to his workout, keeping a watchful eye on the young woman as she resumed her time on the treadmill. Her determination to carry on despite the humiliation she had endured was admirable. However, John's instincts told him that the issue with the guard wasn't over. He had seen the man's frustration and humiliation boiling beneath the surface, and he doubted the situation would resolve without further escalation. True to John's suspicion, the guard reappeared after several minutes, this time approaching John directly. His expression was a mask of simmering rage, his posture rigid as he stood a few feet away. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" The guard sneered, his voice low but filled with venom. John set down the barbell he had been lifting and turned to face him. "I think I stood up for someone who didn't deserve the treatment you gave her. That doesn't make me a hero. That just makes me human." The guard stepped closer, and his face flushed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that's like?" John's gaze didn't waver. "No, I don't. Because I don't go around abusing my authority and making people feel small just to make myself feel big. If you feel humiliated, that's on you." The guard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," John replied, his tone calm but firm. "I know that instead of admitting you were wrong, you doubled down and tried to intimidate her. And now, instead of reflecting on your actions, you're trying to pick a fight with me." The guard's lip curled into a sneer. "Maybe you're the one who needs to be put in his place." Before John could respond, the guard lunged forward, reaching for the taser he had tucked into his belt. The movement was sudden and aggressive, but John had been anticipating it. With years of training and instinct on his side, he sidestepped the attack and grabbed the guard's wrist, twisting it just enough to force him to drop the taser. The taser clattered to the ground, and John kicked it out of reach. The guard, fueled by anger and desperation, swung at John with his free hand, but John ducked the punch and used the guard's momentum against him, flipping him onto the padded gym floor. The impact was loud but controlled, and John made sure not to hurt him more than necessary. The guard tried to scramble to his feet, but John placed a firm hand on his shoulder, holding him in place. "Enough," John said, his voice sharp. "You've already made a fool of yourself. Don't make it worse." The guard struggled for a moment before finally going still. His breathing was heavy, his face red with both exertion and embarrassment. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he muttered, his tone bitter. "I just did," John replied, releasing him and taking a step back. "Now get up and leave before this gets any worse for you." The guard slowly got to his feet, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for some way to salvage his pride. Finding none, he straightened his uniform and muttered, "This isn't over." With that, he turned and left the gym, his footsteps heavy against the floor. John watched him go, his posture relaxed but his senses still alert. He bent down to pick up the taser, handing it to one of the staff members who had cautiously approached during the altercation. "You might want to make sure he doesn't come back with this," John said, his tone light but serious. The staff member nodded, their expression a mix of awe and gratitude. "Thanks, Mr. Cena. That could have gotten a lot worse." John smiled faintly. "Just doing what anyone should." The young woman approached him then, her expression filled with both relief and concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. John chuckled. "I think that's my line." She smiled, though there was still a hint of tension in her eyes. I didn't expect anyone to step in like that. Especially not for someone like me." John's expression softened. "Someone like you? What's that supposed to mean?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Someone who's used to people looking the other way." "Well," John said, his tone gentle but firm, "that's not how it should be. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. And if someone's too blind to see that, then they need to be shown." She nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you, really." "You don't have to thank me," John replied. "You stood your ground. That takes strength. All I did was back you up." She smiled, her gratitude evident. "Still, it means a lot." John gave her a small nod before returning to his workout. The gym gradually returned to its normal rhythm, the earlier tension dissipating. But even as he focused on his routine, John couldn't shake the feeling that the guard's parting words weren't an empty threat. He knew people like that didn't let go of their grudges easily, and he prepared himself for whatever might come next. The sun had set by the time John Cena left the gym, his footsteps steady as he walked toward the parking lot. The earlier tension of the day still lingered in his mind, but he pushed it aside. He had done what he needed to do, and the woman was safe. Still, he couldn't shake the memory of the guard's bitter glare and the promise of retaliation. He scanned the lot as he approached his car, his instincts on high alert. Sure enough, a shadow moved near the far end of the lot. The guard stepped out from behind a parked car, his face twisted with frustration and desperation. He wasn't in uniform anymore, but his aggression was unmistakable. "You think you can humiliate me like that and just walk away?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. John stopped a few feet away, his posture calm but ready. "I don't want any trouble," he said evenly, "but if you're looking for a fight, I promise you won't like how it ends." The guard laughed bitterly, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a pocket knife. "I've had enough of your holier-than-thou act. Let's see how tough you really are." John's eyes narrowed, his muscles tensing. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but firm. "Put it down. This isn't going to go the way you think it will." But the guard charged, his movements clumsy and driven by anger. John sidestepped easily, grabbing the guard's wrist and twisting it until the knife fell to the ground with a metallic clang. The guard yelped in pain, but John didn't let up. Using his strength and precision, he flipped the guard onto his back, pinning him down with a practiced hold. "You need to stop," John said, his voice low and steady. "This isn't just about you and me anymore. You're making it worse for yourself." The guard struggled, but John's grip was unyielding. "You think you're so much better than me," the guard spat. "You think you can just walk in and take over?" John shook his head, his expression calm but resolute. "This was never about me. It's about how you treated her, and now it's about you refusing to take responsibility for your actions. You're the one who put yourself in this position." Before the guard could respond, headlights flooded the parking lot as a car pulled in. The gym's manager stepped out, his face a mix of concern and anger. He had been called by one of the staff members who witnessed the earlier altercation and had arrived to address the situation. "What's going on here?" the manager demanded, his voice sharp. John released the guard and stood up, brushing off his hands. "He followed me out here and pulled a knife," John explained, motioning to the weapon on the ground. "I had to disarm him." The manager's expression darkened as he turned to the guard, who was still lying on the ground. "Is that true?" he asked. The guard muttered something under his breath, avoiding eye contact. The manager shook his head, his disappointment evident. "I don't need to hear another word. You're fired. And if you don't leave this property immediately, I'll be calling the police." The guard scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with humiliation. He shot John one last hateful glare before storming off, muttering curses under his breath. The manager picked up the knife with a tissue, shaking his head as he placed it in his car for safekeeping. "Thank you, Mr. Cena," he said, turning back to John. "This could have gone a lot worse if you hadn't stepped in." John nodded, his expression calm. "I just did what needed to be done." The manager sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We'll be reviewing our hiring process after this, and I'll be making sure the young woman inside knows that this isn't how we treat our members." "That's a good start," John replied, "but make sure it's more than just words. People deserve to feel safe here." The manager nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right. I'll take care of it." As the manager walked back into the gym, John turned toward his car, the weight of the evening finally starting to lift. He knew that justice had been served, but the real victory was in ensuring that the woman, and anyone else who might have been targeted, wouldn't have to face the same treatment again. The next day, John received a text message from the gym's manager. It included a photo of the young woman smiling beside a donation box the gym had set up in her honor, with a note of thanks from her and the staff. It was a small gesture, but it meant that her voice had been heard and her dignity restored. As John read the message, he smiled to himself. The events of the past day were a reminder that standing up for what's right wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And as he headed to his next workout, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that even small acts of courage could make a big difference. This story reminds us that standing up for what's right can make all the difference. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Courage and justice prevail when we choose to take a stand against prejudice and abuse. What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread this message further. Together, we can create a more just and fair world. Thank you for watching.